This is Rob Kramarz of Inteliversity again. We're here with Geert Schmidt-Schoenbein and John Rodenreis of Leading BioSciences. I just want to remind you that this is not a offer to sell securities or a solicitation to buy them. This is a training video for entrepreneurs and the investment community relating to what makes a successful entrepreneurial venture in the scientific community, both successful in the funding process and successful ultimately in the regulatory and in the marketing process. What I'd like to ask you is, get this on a personal level, but what's been your experience in the funding process so far? Now, I don't mean that John represents the funding process, but outside of we angels, what's been each of your personal experience trying and battling to raise capital to keep this project going?
In my case, it's very simple. I have had the tremendous fortune that I've been able to attract and get NIH funding for a long time.
That's
pretty continuous. That was possible to support students. I also had a period of time I maintained an NSF grant. I was able to get funding from private foundations, all designed to understand basic mechanisms and improve our understanding about these inflammatory disease processes. So I have no complaint about funding. The funding has been wonderful, and I wouldn't be sitting here if it weren't for that. When I was trying to translate some of these ideas, however, into a real application, then at that particular point, I encountered, for example, a comment that says, well, this is too much basic science. This is not ready yet for clinical use. And I have really no good defense against that. I have to take that criticism. On the other hand, I have a situation where I would say, well, we have now good preclinical results. Why don't we try to convince an IRB? And then I'm very quickly told, wait a second, the IRB is going to ask much tougher questions. They want to have additional results. You don't have them. Therefore, you're not ready to go for that yet. So I encounter a situation in which trying to understand basic mechanisms, I can continue on for another couple of years, 20 years. But I would like to see whether these ideas work in humans. And that translation is where I fall short. I'm just not a very good in selling myself, and I need help. And that's why this collaboration with John is just so wonderful. And nothing would be moving forward in that direction unless it would be with this involvement of the private hand.
And of course, that's what we're trying to communicate to the scientific community wherever possible, to bring in competent business experience and investment experience into your creative process, because it's the collaboration that was so rich here, that's been so rich, and it continues to be that way, that will ultimately enrich the company and society. John, what was your personal experience now that you've been, I know, trying to raise more capital, keep the process moving?
It's easier now than it was before. We didn't have a lot of results. But we faced a typical conundrum. Who do you go to? So we went to VCs. VCs said, too early. And we started this in 2008. They also said, we don't have any money anymore because we lost it on the stock market with the 2008 crash. So we went to pharma companies. Pharma companies should love this. They said, no, we only invest if you got human results. So fortunately, we've been able to acquire several $1 million, $300 million or so, that we've invested in this, all from private accredited investors, Tech Coast Angel kind of people, who looked at it and said, I know it's early and it's riskier, but it's got so much potential that we'll invest in it. And we have not taken any institutional money, partly because of that. We're at a point now where we could. I don't think we're going to. I think we're going to partner with a big pharma company to move this into the clinic.
Okay.
But raising capital has been harder than I thought it was going to be.
Interesting. Interesting. So your choice going forward then, what's exciting about this, I should tell everyone, is that because of the richness of their team, the depth of their teams, not just these two also, they're able to conceive of a pipeline of products. They have 7 products in the pipeline now, all related to the inflammation process. Both short-term critical care, and in some cases you're looking at long-term metabolic syndrome and how your discoveries may influence long-term care. So the pipeline of products will give you the opportunity to get many licensing events.
Right.
The first licensing event will then allow you to fund the rest of the pipeline.
Correct.
And therefore you don't need to give away a large share of the company to venture capital, institutional money.
It's a different model than a typical VC model.
Right.
The VC gets all the money up front and then searches for products.
Right.
What we did is we got the portfolio together first, and then as investors came in, they came in at different valuations.
Right. As you moved further along, the valuation was higher.
Was higher. And so it's an evergreen thing. Once we partner in Inflammagen, we'll have enough funds to move the other 6 into commercial use and human testing.
So that's one of the subjective calculations that you've had to do. It's perhaps sensible to license Inflammagen earlier in order to provide a lot of capital for the follow-on product. But exactly when do you take the licensing opportunity or hold off for a larger exit? Tough calculation.
It's a very difficult, because on the one hand, I've got shareholders who want an early exit.
Right.
And I want funds coming in so we can greatly expand. I'd like to double what we're doing with his lab, because we have so much in the pipeline.
Yeah.
If I get him more postdocs, we could deliver several of these a year. But it's that versus, the farther we go, the more the valuation is going to be. We're very close here in the U.S. to starting a human trial with this. And we're both confident it's going to be very similar to what happened in Type A. If we get human results in the U.S., the valuation is going to go up significantly.
Does the pharmaceutical community presently, are they presently licensing products that are in phase 1 trials?
Oh, very, very much so.
Very
Phase
much
1
so.
and phase 2.
So not waiting to phase 2 necessarily anymore?
Because they don't have much in their pipeline, they're forced to go outside. So they're even licensing preclinical animal data at very high valuations.
So that's a change from the last couple of years.
It's a change.
Movement earlier in the process.
Yeah.
Interesting.
A lot of drugs are coming off patent right now, and they're scrambling to find products to replace them.
All right. So, how would you wrap up with what could you tell other scientists and other business executives who are doing the same kind of thing in other product areas? What have you learned from this experience that wouldn't be obvious from what you've already said? What could you teach?
Well, first of all, it's like getting married. The relationship with Garrett has been going on 5 or 6 years. We interact very closely. If I didn't like Garrett, or if he was hard to deal with, it would be very, very difficult. So get to know the person, get to know their ethics, make sure they're honest, and make sure your objectives are aligned. And ours are, because we want to both make money, but also move this into the clinic so we can start saving humans.
Yes.
And you got to ask that up front, and you got to get to know the person.
Okay.
From my point of view, I would say, I now speak from a science point of view, the most important thing is make sure that your basic assumptions are correct. That often takes a very deep thinking about, do I really understand the process that I want to interfere with? And in biology, that's a challenge. Biology has so many players in any process you look at.
Yeah.
You really understand them. So that issue is a very serious issue for medical researchers.
Yeah.
There's a long list of failed attempts, and you ask yourself, okay, why did they fail, and how do you know that you can possibly do it better? So that takes a very special level of honesty and robustness in your thinking.
Yes.
That is essential, because without that, nothing will ever move afterwards. You may be able to come over the first hump, but certainly in the second or third clinical trial, it will come to light. This idea was all wrong.
How interesting.
And so I have to, my key concern is there any evidence published by us or anybody else that would say, hey, your basic hypothesis is wrong?
Yes.
I will immediately have to put a stop on that.
Yeah.
So basic scientific honesty is really at the very heart of
Yes,
this issue.
I can see that.
Right, and not just believing, well, I'm right and I know how this process works and I have some preliminary results that support it. It's not enough.
It's interesting because you can be dishonest because you're deliberately dishonest, or you can be dishonest just because you live in a world of wishful thinking.
There you go.
And
Right.
the scientific discipline requires neither form of dishonesty.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the deliberate dishonesty.
Right.
That's not in the big.
That's not the issue.
It's the wishful thinking.
Yes.
And here, as a scientist, the more honest you can be, the better the world will actually be afterwards. Yeah.
It's interesting. Yeah.
And you have to sometimes admit, by the way, I was wrong.
Thank you very much. We'll see you on the next recording.